episode of the BioHub. Today, I'm delighted to have Dr. Aoife Brennan, CEO of Climb Bio. Aoife brings over 20 years of experience leading drug development across various therapeutic areas. Previously, she served as president and CEO of Synlogic, guiding it from an early stage startup to a late phase public company. Before Synlogic, Aoife led the Rare Disease Innovation Unit at Biogen, where she was instrumental in securing global approvals for key rare disease treatments. At Climb Bio, Aoife now leads an innovative biotech company developing treatments for immune-mediated diseases. Her journey is filled with lessons on leadership, team building, and fostering a dynamic company culture. In this episode, we'll dive into her career, the story behind Climb Bio, and her insights on building a strong company culture and inspiring the next generation of biotech leaders. Welcome to the show. How are you, Aoife?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Max.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. It's a pleasure. And we'll just jump in. So just talking about your career and your journey in biotech from Biogen to Synlogic and then now Climb Bio. What drew you to take on the challenge of leading Climb Bio, and how has the transition been?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of always been a journey of moving towards things that I feel are challenging. And I never thought I'd be a biotech CEO, number one. So there was never like a grand plan that, the destiny for me career-wise was the CEO of Climb Bio. It's always been kind of finding myself at different junctures career-wise and looking around and choosing something that I thought was exciting and challenging, and a situation where I thought I'd learn new skills and be pushed outside my comfort zone. And when I was, earlier this year, was looking around for a new opportunity, the Climb Bio opportunity came up, and it was, around June. I got a call about a company that was being kind of formed around a predecessor public company called Elium Therapeutics, that had an asset capital but didn't have a leadership team in place. So it was a real kind of new build, but it was a very atypical new build in that it was already a public company and already had a clinical stage asset, but didn't really have an operating team. And so that to me struck me as like a really unique challenge of pulling a team together really quickly in order to continue to execute on what is a really exciting clinical stage asset. So, based on my prior experience of building and leading teams, I found that a really compelling opportunity and just jumped right in to do it. So it's kind of always been very much opportunistic. Every career decision is always very much in the moment, and an opportunity that comes along just at a point in time where I'm open to considering new things. And that's exactly what happened in this case with Climb.
Yeah, amazing. And then you mentioned about the rebrand from LEM. Can you just share the story about why the rebrand and why it's so important?
Yeah, so the Elium, it was a neuroscience-focused company. It went public in 2021. They had two really interesting neuroscience-based programs. But as happens to a lot of biotech companies, the science evolved, and there was less investor interest in those programs as time went by. So they were left as a public company with a lot of capital, but their two programs were kind of had puttered out, if you will, and were no longer as interesting and compelling to investors. So the company had kind of stalled from a growth perspective. They were no longer investing in their internal assets, and they had lots of resources. They had a public company operations, they had cash, but didn't necessarily have development programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so they looked around, the management team and the board looked around for new opportunities that could be a better investment and a better focus for the company compared to, where they had been focused, and decided that immunology was the place and the go forward plan for the company. And so with that, during that period of transition, obviously Elium had been there. It takes a while to go through that process of kind of pivoting and refocusing. Elium had been known as a very neuroscience focused company. A lot of the branding and kind of reputation had been built around neuroscience. We were now focusing on a very different therapeutic area, very different brand and mission. It was a lot of work to rebrand a public company, not just the name change, but all of the corporate documents and work that goes on behind the scenes to make
Yeah.
that transition. When I saw the work that was involved, I kind of decided, actually, you know what? Allium's a nice name. Maybe we can just change the colors on this, call it a day, and actually get back to, getting trials done and developing these assets. But our advisors and our communications team really felt that kind of a top to bottom rebrand and refresh was what was required. We changed our ticker symbol. We're listed on NASDAQ. So we changed the ticker, we changed the website, we changed the name. It required, redoing all of our agreements. It was
Yeah.
a huge amount of work that occurred over the summer. But I do think, the payoff is essentially like a restart where you get to redefine yourself and redefine the mission, the vision of the organization. The focus now is really on patients with immune mediated diseases. We get to talk a lot more about what drives us as an organization and really redefine ourselves as being focused in this disease and therapeutic area. And over time, I think the kind of the Allium historical and legacy focus will fade away. Whereas I think had we retained the name, I think that would have kind of followed us. We would have constantly be
Yeah.
misclassified into neuroscience. So I do think it was an important step for us in terms of this pivot that we went through over the summer, even though it was a lot of work.
Yeah. How did you settle on the name? Did it have some meaning behind it?
We did. It was challenging. We decided that we were going to do the rebrand. The company kind of formed in July. We decided that we were going to do this renaming in August. And we set a deadline. We said, okay, we want to launch this company by the 1st of October because we needed to take advantage of some of the investor conferences coming up in the fourth quarter. So setting this deadline of, okay, we need to have our website working backwards from the 1st of October really put us under a lot of timeline pressure. This is like one of my things as a CEO is like working backwards, set a firm deadline. You have to draw a line in the sand. Otherwise, these processes can often take forever, because you can imagine, anything creative can often go on. There's nothing ever perfect. It can bleed on for a long period of time. But setting that deadline of, okay, our launch date is the 1st of October, come hell or high water, we are launching this new company on the 1st of October. So we had a very disciplined, creative process where we went through a series of weekly meetings, starting
Mhm.
off with this really broad conceptual framework to work as a team on what were the concepts that appealed to us. And we went through like a lots of things, like thinking about Latin and Greek phrases and things that represented, immunology and cell types and lots of different kind of esoteric things and words that had no meaning at all. And, at one point, somebody came up with this concept of because we're a B cell depleting company, our science is based on depletion of B cells. How about we choose a word that has a silent B? So it's a very, commonly used word, but it also has a nod to the science. So it's
Nice.
not super geeky, it's not a word that, only a scientist, only a PhD scientist will understand, but yet it does have a link back to the science in some way. And so we went through the list, lamb, plum, none of those are good options for obvious reasons. No one's going to invest in a biotech company called Lamb Bio. If anything, you want to be Wolf Bio, but not
Yeah,
Lamb
yeah.
Bio. So we were like, went through the list and we're like, okay, which one of these sounds like a good, silent B word that could be a good biotech company? And then we came in Climb and we're like, somebody must have used Climb before as a biotech company. It seemed kind of an obvious name that somebody would have used because just, mountains and climbing are,
Yeah, yeah.
often used as kind of visuals and branding aids. And we looked through and we were all, of course, as a team, when you're trying to do these exercises, always somebody online, checking out, doing a Google search of saying, is there anyone called Climb Bio, Climb Pharma, Climb Medicine? And we couldn't believe it. We're like, it seems like it's not taken. And then someone else is doing the ticker symbols of like all the variations. And we just hit on it as a concept, did a
Amazing.
quick search. and it seemed like it was available. And then, of course, there's another process of doing a more thorough, trade name and copyright search and everything else. But it just kind of hit a chord once we hit on the name, and it was unanimous. It's very hard to get, 10 different people to agree on anything. But once we hit on this concept, everyone liked it for different reasons. But I think it spoke to everybody for some reason, and so it was from there it moved pretty quickly.
That's amazing. Yeah. And then there's the other side of the pivot, beyond the rebrand. You spoke about the team and, you know, the technology. How's the other side of the pivot been?
Yeah, so bringing the team together in short order is also super challenging. When companies go public, often they've spent 7, 8, 10 years together, coming together, forming as a group. Some people come, some people leave, they get to know each other. You kind of build that cohesive team culture because you've been through ups and downs as a private company together, and then kind of the transition to public, and the team evolves and grows. And we didn't have that luxury. I was also conscious that I didn't just want to bring in and recreate, like call up a bunch of people I've worked with before and bring them all in as kind of a unit,
Mhm.
because I don't think that's a healthy thing, because you end up with then, an in group and an out group. But we've kind of formed the team through a combination of people who've worked together before as well as people who are new, and so it's a pretty diverse team just in terms of backgrounds. Some of us have prior relationships. Some people have different, come from different spaces and different industries and therapeutic areas. We're still building. We're only, I guess, 5, almost 6 months into this journey of kind of building a new public company from scratch. We were really fortunate in that we had a small finance team who came from the legacy Allium organization. There was like about 5 people who
Nice.
stayed from the original Allium IPO and who've continued with the company based out in Seattle. And we're really lucky that they made the decision to continue on with the company, because running as every public company CEO knows, you have to close the books every quarter, and having, a really solid group looking after your finances and your accounting is something that's super important as a public company. And so having a really great finance team has been a huge advantage for us. So the accounting and finance team have continued, and that continuity has been really important for us. And so it's been kind of a group that has like a patchwork quilt, right? Of some people with prior relationships, some people who are getting to know each other. We do have our first big all company offsite coming together just after the holidays. So I think that's going to be, a really great opportunity to kind of further cement and solidify those new relationships. And we'll continue to grow and iterate, because often you don't get it right first time, right? You sometimes have, you've gaps. You think
Yeah.
you fixed something, the company changes, needs change. You're in this business, right, Max? You work with companies all the time on talent. And there's one thing I think that's, constant in biotech, and that's change. People change, the needs of the company change, the environment changes. So you're constantly evolving. But it's been a really fun time, and it's been great for me personally to get to know some new people as part of this exercise. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think you're thinking the right way, just from experience with working with those companies. I mean, what comes to mind for me is like 2021, when so many companies were IPOing, that golden egg that people kept asking me for was, I want a CFO. I want a CFO who's been a serial IPO and done that. But you seem to think more long term, which they didn't necessarily do, because those serial IPOers then leave and go into another role. And I always said that actually what you need is not necessarily someone who's done an IPO before, but a public company CFO who will stick around after. And there's so many really good public company CFOs who are dying to go and do that S1 and that IPO, and they would be really good at it. So I always recommended that. But that was just a prime example of people who are thinking of the immediate, which I don't want to knock down the importance of getting that IPO right, but I think thinking long term is is way more important, basically. And I think the way you're talking about it is these people
Oh
are
yeah.
not, they're going to be around for the whole journey, which is the exciting part.
Oh yeah, that's so important.
I
You've
want to,
There's so many people who can help you with the short term. There's so many people who can come in a pinch and help you. You need to build the company for the long term. I agree 100%.
yeah. And you have pretty extensive experience building and leading companies as well. But can we just talk through some? We've talked through a little bit, but just some of the key lessons that you've learned about creating a strong culture and a really strong environment for innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a little bit of an outlier when it comes to culture and innovation. And maybe it's a cultural thing because, I'm originally Irish. And, I think a lot of the things that we think are the right thing to do about culture and innovation turn out to be kind of not the right thing to do, because we live in this world of like AI and artificial and everything's online and social media. And my sense of people crave like authenticity and realness and just, to feel that they have a real, genuine human connection. And I think a lot of the kind of textbook, creative culture, hire someone in to do some facilitated workshop with trust falls and, offsites, just those are not the things that really long term build cohesion and trust and culture. And we've so many opportunities in biotech in particular to build genuine connection. I mean, we're working in areas that are really important, with a huge important human element. We're making treatments for patients. There's a lot of failure. There's a huge number of setbacks. Those are all things that builds trust and connection if you're truthful and open and okay talking about those challenges with the team. And what sometimes I find is that people will shy away from having the real talk conversations with the team and pretend like everything is awesome. And then they'll like the team all smell that it's BS because they know that that their leaders are not telling them the truth about what's going on. And then you'll spend all this time and effort trying to create some kind of fake cohesion by, spending time doing these workshops or putting a ping pong table in the lobby or like
Yeah,
doing some kind of like offsite that creates some kind of fake team, dynamic building. And like you have this golden opportunity with like some of these difficult situations that occur day to day to build great team culture that you just pass up on. And instead, you're spending money creating some kind of fake artificial situation that half of your people, think is complete BS. And the other half of them are only going along because they think they want to be good company and good corporate citizens and have to
yeah,
pretend like they're really into it. And there's only actually about 10% of your employees who are actually genuinely having fun and enjoying it. And like they're the, super extroverts who just love doing anything, who'd go to the opening of an envelope. So you've 90% of your employees who are like, only semi there. And yet you're missing this genuine, real opportunity to be authentic and to be a leader and to share the real truth with people, which is, look, guys, this is a really difficult business. We're doing this really important work for patients and it's probably going to fail. And like 70-80% of companies don't succeed here, but the ones that do, make a huge difference. And when you get people to buy into that, like they're all in, because you're being real with them, you're telling them the truth, you're letting them under the tent. And you have like 100% loyalty and buy in those situations when you're real and honest with people. But when you're not real and honest with people, no number of ping pong tables and team lunches and offsites can compensate for people smelling that you're not being authentic and real with them as a leader. So, I think, we have to just be cognizant of that in this kind of era of, a lot of things being fake and artificial, that, real human connection still trumps everything when it comes to leadership. So
I
that's
couldn't
kind of
agree
my
more.
perspective. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. We spend a lot of time on culture, and I think it's important to get it right from the start. And the way we always say describe it is culture is more behaviors across the company. It's not like you say ping pong tables and meals out. You know, we all laughed in the office, and I won't name what company it was, but it was another recruitment company in Leeds, and they did a little promo video for LinkedIn about how good their culture was and how good it was to work there. And they did a few interviews with their employees. And one of the exact words that came out of one of the recruiters' mouths was, "Our culture is great. Our culture is going out for beers on a Friday evening." And I was like, that's just not what it's about at all. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just so important. And of course, it's easy to check the box on the going out for beers. We do the team lunch, we do the whatever else. It's more difficult, I think, to do some of the other stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's so
I think
super
you're right.
important.
We're not saying you shouldn't do those things. Those things are great. It's just the idea of actually what culture is wrong, really. I do a lot of analogies about what culture is, and it's say your mantra is excellence, for example. Um, I always use this, but it's if someone puts a piece of work in front of me and I read it through and I go, look, that's not good enough. Our mantra is excellence. They go away, they do it again. I say it's still not good enough. They go away, they do it again, and then they go, right, okay, that's great. That's excellence. And then you do that enough times, then you go on holiday and you're out of the office and the team's having a board a meeting of some sort, and someone puts a document in the middle of the table, and then the rest of the table go, well, no, that's not us. We strive for excellence. That's not good enough. That's when you've got the culture right, and it's more behaviours than saying we've got a ping pong table. I think that's the best
Yes.
way to describe it. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, that actually came from Airbnb CEO, which I'd follow a lot of his things. I think it's really interesting. But
Cool.
yeah, I want to go back to, I suppose, Climb Bio, really new name in the industry now. What's it like not being a household name, and how do you approach them building trust in the market and attracting attention from investors? How is that different?
Yeah, so I think we have to recognize that we're starting from scratch. We just got our first covering analyst last week, so we started off with no analyst coverage. So there's no one out there talking about us or publishing notes, or you've no emails arriving into your inbox with Climb Bio's updates and them. So you really are starting from scratch. So you have to do a lot of work. Being out there, presenting at conferences, doing the one-to-ones, taking the calls to really get the word out and start to tell the story. We did an investor event in October, which was very successful. We got a lot of participants. We're trying to use social media to spread the word and to make the science available for people. And I think the space is evolving now. We try to kind of stay up to date on how are investors engaging with companies now in 2024, 2025. And I do think that's different from 2005. I think things have changed, and having things available in bite size so that when people get to your website, things are easy to find. You can click through, you can get to what you need. And we're still working on that. We're not there yet, but we're going to continue to work to make sure that it's super easy for people who want to learn about the company, and that we have what you need, kind of self-service. And then it's just about being really open to meeting and engaging with people. So when people reach out to us, yeah, we're available next week. Here's some times you can call and engage. And then, I think we will get analyst coverage with in time as we get out there. But I think you have to be cognizant that it's going to take time and it's going to take some work. Because you don't have that kind of 4 or 5 year history of the lead up to an IPO and the roadshow and all of that work that happens around an IPO. So you kind of have to start a little bit from scratch and recognize that you have a little bit more work to do than you would normally. So yeah, that's the journey we're on now, and we're not daunted by that. We're just buckling in and ready to do the work.
I love that. And you said something earlier about it being a blank slate and that being a good thing, and you've got this reputation to build and do it in the right way. I think that's all amazing. Um, and then I just want to talk, because I know it's really important to you, about inspiring the younger professionals and scientists who are starting out in biotech. What advice would you give to them?
I think it's a great career and a great profession. I'd love to see some of the like bright young graduates coming in, don't go to consulting, don't go to investment banking, come over to biotech and help us solve big problems. Because I do think there's amazing science and there are amazing scientific discoveries, but we still have a lot of challenges in getting those scientific discoveries and breakthroughs to a point where they can really impact lives. And it's not just, therapeutics. I think we have an opportunity to change agriculture, climate change. There's biotech has potential to solve a lot of the biggest problems that are facing us as a race, right? As a planet. There's a huge potential. And there's so many elements of that problem that need to be solved. It's not just the science, there's policy issues. We still have issues around access. So, patients don't necessarily, even when you develop a drug, you have the scientific breakthrough, then you have all the clinical trials and jumping through all the regulatory hoops to get a product approved. Then you have all of the challenge of making sure that the patients who can potentially benefit are getting access to that therapy. And there's so many challenges that we need to kind of navigate there that are very far away from being done on that side. So regardless of where your passion is, if it's political science, if you want to go into government, like I think there's just so many ways that you can help and be part of the solution here, being kind of understanding this area of scientific innovation and helping kind of solve problems for people. There's just so much potential because we're doing a lot. There's a lot of breakthroughs in science. And one of my frustrations is that we're not pulling those through from an impact perspective quickly enough. So we're making all the discoveries, we're just not pulling them through to actually impact people's lives and to having an impact on some of these big problems quickly enough. And I'd love to see some more brain power and youthful energy being dedicated to some of those big problems. So it's we definitely need more smart young people focused on this area for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I always pinch myself, and I'm really grateful that I happened to have fallen into this industry and almost cheated my way in a little bit through recruitment. But I think it's still so rewarding, even from this side, and talking to people whose passion for a really amazing industry always comes through, and you can see where they want to go, where their priorities lie in terms of focusing on what's really important in the world. And we talked about culture and what's important. I think even going back and meeting patients with the diseases that you're trying to solve is really important for bringing that passion through for younger people as well, because sometimes we've all been affected by someone with cancer, for example. But if you're working on the more rare diseases, then I think it's really important to understand what you're working with and why it's so important, and who you're solving this problem for.
Agree 100%. Yeah, I think remaining that in touch with the real experience is so important, because sometimes I think we can think that a problem is solved and it's really not, or we can think that a certain innovation is going to take care of an issue, and when you actually go and spend time with patients, you'll find that their needs are a little bit different to what you think you're solving for. So we can develop better drugs for patients and be more successful commercially if you stay in touch. So it really is like a win-win-win to really maintain close contact with the patients that you want to serve. So that's really one of our tenets as a company, is to kind of keep that connection there and spend a lot of time there. So it's couldn't agree more.
I love that. Love that. And then finally, and sorry if I catch you off guard with this question, if you could have dinner with any scientist or innovator, past or present, who would it be and why? And just, if this is a question I've been asking all of the guests, so I've had some quite
I
different
know.
answers.
I know. So I have to tell you, you mentioned that my last company was Synlogic. We were developing engineered bacteria as therapeutics. And I developed a little mini obsession about the history of TB. And so because the first bacteria that was developed therapeutically was actually the BCG vaccine. So I ended up going down a rabbit hole around the history of the development of BCG. So I would absolutely love to have dinner with the couple that developed the BCG vaccine, Camille and Guerin, they lived around the time of the First World War. And the story around the development of the BCG, it's actually the vaccine it's been the most widely used vaccine on the planet. Like, a lot of people get vaccinated. I was vaccinated when I was born with the BCG vaccine. But the story of the development of BCG around the First World War is super fascinating, and how they came about the discovery, how they maintained the scientific work, it was developed in France around the time of the First World War, and how they kept the research going in a time of war is just super fascinating. And I love history and the history of medicine, and to kind of understand and spend time and hear that story firsthand, I think would be pretty special and amazing. I think TB is also really interesting from just a history of medicine perspective, because it appears so often in movies and books. There's often the kind of sickly character with, coughing blood into the hanky kind of thing. So it's just a really interesting historical disease that, is not so prevalent anymore, certainly in the developed world. But I've always kind of had a little bit of a fascination with the history of TB and the impact it's had on health and history globally. So spending
I love
time
that.
with them, I think, would be really interesting, and I think we'd learn a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the mix of science and the time they lived in, yeah, I love that. I love
And
that. Look,
history.
thanks.
Hopefully, that's an answer you haven't gotten from anyone else before.
No, definitely not. um, Look, thanks so much for coming on, Aoife. It's been an absolute pleasure and really interesting. Please, everyone, like and subscribe to the BioHub, and thank you again.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure, Max. Thanks for having me.